So Derek, what's the hardest part about living in Denmark?
Well, one really hard thing is everybody is so attractive.
Oh, and there's so many good bread options.
And I just don't know how to schedule all my free time from leaving work at 4 p.m. And it's 6 hours before I go to bed. What am I supposed to do?
Speaking of work, people bring way too much cake into the office.
Yeah, it's really tough living here.
So hard.
Just kidding. So we've been told that we're a little bit too positive, so we decided that we would get into this topic that a few people have asked for, which is what are the hard things about living in Denmark?
Yeah, so this isn't us hating on our home. We want to make sure you realize this. But we think since our audience is curious about these sort of topics, and since you guys, I think, can genuinely learn from a perspective that you don't know if you're Danish on the things that make it hard for foreigners, this is, I think, a good one for us to share our perspective on.
Yeah, and we recently had some conversations in our Facebook group where we kind of learned the hard way that we may be putting out just a little bit too much positivity about what it's like to live here. Now, Denmark is a fantastic country to move to. Copenhagen is constantly voted one of the most livable cities in the world, but we did realize that we've left out some of the difficult parts about moving anywhere, and specifically about moving to Denmark. So let's get into it.
So the first topic we're going to talk about is housing. Now, especially in Copenhagen, housing is really difficult to find as it's in real tight supply. But housing in general across Denmark, we've heard, is difficult too. Partly because as foreigners, you're coming in and having to operate in a language that you're not used to. And for that reason, landlords, if you're renting, can have a lot of power over what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and not just that, when you are renting, often the deposits are a lot more than we're used to in the US, where it may be first month's, last month's, and potentially one extra month of a security deposit. Here, it can be very normal to have to put down 6 months of rent, which is a lot of money to save up just to rent an apartment that isn't even yours. And also, when it comes to the deposit, landlords are notorious for not giving you any of the deposit back. So imagine having to put down 6 months of rent and then getting very little of that deposit back because you need to repaint or it's not the right shade of white when you repaint your walls. That can be really difficult to deal with if you're renting in Denmark.
Yeah, and it's not much easier on the buying side. Now, understand that anytime you're buying in a foreign country, it's going to be a lot more difficult than for locals. But we had the experience as well of not only having to operate in a foreign language, but also the fact that banks aren't inclined to be able to give loans to foreigners. And it makes sense. I mean, it's that they see us as a flight risk. If things turn south, then we could just leave, and they're holding into an apartment in a down economy. But at the same time, it's not easy, and it's something that can be a real challenge. It's been a challenge for us here in Denmark.
Yeah, it's especially true for Americans because the U.S. requires a lot of tax information and things that banks here just don't really want to have to deal with because, well, they don't have to do that with other countries. So even another thing that's a little bit harder for Americans especially. Okay, and the next one is actually a bit of a surprise for a lot of people that we talk to, especially in America, because most people around the world think of Denmark as this wonderful country where everything works perfectly due to a lot of government investment. But that's actually not the case with the Postal Service. Yeah, post in Denmark is not so great. So they have had a government-run postal service since 1624, but in 1995, I'm not sure why, they decided to privatize the postal service. And the results were not good.
Yeah, in our experience and the few times that we have to use it, it's expensive, it's not the most reliable. I mean, for us, thankfully our home state of Pennsylvania wasn't that close in the last election because I'm not entirely sure our ballots made it back home.
But we had a very expensive post.
It was very expensive to fly them there, I'll tell you that. But these are the things that make it really challenging to use. Thankfully, people are moving more towards an electronic system across the world because if we had to rely on mail here, it'd certainly be a lot more challenging here. So for Americans that are looking at this and think that the Postal Service in the U.S. isn't all that great, my God, the mail actually gets there usually in a day or two. So accept it, it's much better than it is here.
Yeah, if you can give somebody an envelope in Key West, Florida, and they'll deliver it to Anchorage, Alaska for 49 cents or whatever a postage stamp is, I mean, that's pretty good. And trust me, in Denmark, it's nothing like that.
Now, this next topic is a little bit of a touchy one, but Denmark can be a little resistant to foreigners. Now, on a personal level, we've had obviously a positive experience here, but also this isn't always the easiest country to acclimate into. We've already talked on different videos about how it's difficult to make Danish friends and how Danish directness and humor can be off-putting. And there are a lot of other fundamental challenges for foreigners living here in Denmark.
Right, and immigration is a hot button issue all around the world. And although we try not to be too political here, we do really want to keep things positive. we would be silly not to act like immigration isn't often a political ploy here in Denmark, just like in other countries around the world. And foreigners are often used as that pawn to gain votes or build support for different coalitions. And on both sides of the aisle, that happens here in Denmark. And we've seen the changes from these anti-immigration policies affect us in Danish lessons, English language being taught in universities, and just people getting their visas revoked. So very serious complications. And at the root of it, these policies are designed to make life harder for people that are living here from foreign countries. And they're also designed to discourage people from coming to Denmark to work or to study. But the important thing is that you are going to have a hard time living here if you can't separate the government from the people that are in your day-to-day lives, your colleagues, your co-workers, the people that you're studying with, your neighbors. You can't put the actions of the government on the people that you're around every day.
Yeah, and we have to acknowledge that we are lucky. We come from a bit of privilege here where we've had support from our companies and making sure that we can navigate the immigration policies, and we've been able to be in a very lucky situation here, more so than a lot of other people that have been affected by various immigration policies here. So obviously this is a hot button issue. This is something that I'm sure we'll have some discussion in the comments on below. And I know that there's obviously reasons behind the different policies. Everything has to be explained along. Totally understand that. But the net effect, if you're a foreigner here, is that it certainly doesn't make life a lot easier. And we feel it, and we know that others do as well.
Okay, and another hard thing about living in Denmark is learning Danish. So, of course, I don't think it's a secret that Danish is a difficult language to learn, but if you're going to get permanent residency or citizenship, you're going to have to pass your Danish test. You need to learn the language. And furthermore, you definitely need it at some point just to assimilate to life in Denmark and Danish culture. It's really expected that if you're going to be here for more than just a year or two studying or a year or two working, that you do learn the language in Denmark.
Yeah, and we've gone through this on why it's hard to learn. Again, this isn't a video talking about should you or shouldn't you learn Danish. You should, but it does make it hard for foreigners, and we've gone through why it is. It isn't pronounced the way that it looks, like a lot of other languages are. It's not used widely, especially here in Copenhagen, where you can get away with English, and often people will switch from Danish to English just to make it easier for you. We've gone through the fact that it's not used all over the world, and so you're going to invest in learning a language that really only works inside Denmark. Again, these aren't excuses why you shouldn't learn Danish. You should, but it doesn't make it easier, and it's one thing that makes it challenging and kind of hard to live here as a foreigner. Another thing that makes it hard for foreigners to adjust here in Denmark is that it is not cheap. Denmark's a pricey place to live, and obviously this is a place where wages are a bit higher than elsewhere to offset the higher prices and higher taxes that you pay, and net we more or less take home the same that we would have back in the US, but at the same time it's a little bit of a shocker and something to get used to, and if you come from a place that is a little bit cheaper, it's certainly going to be something that makes it hard for you to adjust to.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us as Americans, we would really say it's almost like paying New York City prices for things. The difference, though, is that in Denmark, there are some things that are just price prohibitive for people. And as Americans, we're used to always having kind of mid-range options to go out to eat. But in Denmark, restaurants are a bit more expensive, and that may mean that you go out to dinner less, or you don't have as much access to going out to dinner. It's just not as common. It's more of a special occasion here because it's a bit pricier. So you will eventually find ways that your budget works out better here in Denmark than it does, at least for us in the US. But keep in mind that some things are pricey, and if you're just coming, even if you're just coming for a short time to visit, you're going to see that prices are quite a bit higher. And another hard thing about living in Denmark, and this is specific to us as Americans, is that we often have to answer for everything that our country does or the people that lead our country do. And, you know, sometimes we just want to be treated as Derek and Mike and not necessarily as ambassadors for the United States of America. You know, we don't work for the government. We don't represent any administration or political party or corporation. We are not members of the diplomatic embassy. We're just two people. And sometimes, especially during the election season last year, it was really difficult that we would see people and the first thing they would say to us is, well, do you think Biden's going to win? Like, I'm not a political analyst. You know, I'm not a foreign policy expert. I don't know the answers of Afghanistan. You know, just let me be and let's have a beer. Sometimes that's all I want.
Yeah, and one of the challenges is that, I mean, honestly, American news is very much in the news here. I see all the time on news updates referring to things that are happening in the US, and they often come at the same time as like a New York Times news update here as well. So people here are very well informed, to their credit. There's a lot of knowledge here about what's happening in America, though obviously there isn't as much of the depth and nuance. I wouldn't expect anybody who's not from the US to understand the details of the Electoral College or the nuances of regional politics across the US or cultural politics or anything like that. So it also makes it a little bit difficult for us because sometimes we also have to play teacher a little bit to kind of explain the background on different things. Like sometimes it's fun, like it's nice to be able to share your culture and where you're from. Also, as Derek says, sometimes you're just having a beer and you don't want to talk politics. Like you want to be able to leave that all behind a little bit. So that can be a challenge for us a little bit, is having to navigate that and wanting to be able to participate in people's curiosities and where we come from, but also not feeling like we have to be reporters on the ground.
Right. So I stopped saying, how are you doing when I meet people. So please stop asking me about the former guy's tweets when, when you see me. That would be appreciated. Well, anyway, we appreciate all of you, and thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that it was not a difficult conversation. We really wanted to keep this positive because we do love living in Denmark, but we also wanted to make sure that we were giving an accurate portrayal of some of the things that are hard about living in this country, even though we love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We have new content like this coming out every week, so hit that bell for notifications so you can be informed every time we upload a video. Thanks, guys.
Hi.